Over the summer, we took the opportunity to speak to Paul Mundy-Castle, head teacher of a large secondary school in South London, to consider how he's used the app within his school and actually the second experience of working with us at CJ Learning Technologies. Here's Paul talking about his experience of working with SMARTcurriculum.
Well, yeah, I see COVID as a huge opportunity. I've had a personal belief, which is one I've held, that we haven't done well enough in schools. You know, when you think about at the end of secondary education, you're talking maybe 55% of the school 16-year-olds leave with gold standard qualifications. You know, your old money 5, subjects at 5 or above, or the old money 5A to C. So you are condemning another 46% who just didn't make that benchmark. And after the years of investment in primary and secondary education, I just don't think that's good enough. So I think COVID offers us a different opportunity to work smarter. I think the explosion of technology and how we can better use technology to make sure kids are not left behind. Every school had to move to some sort of online learning, and that's given us a chance to really develop that platform, whether it's Google Classroom or Teams, how we've taught remote lessons. You now have a new world where actually you could stick a camera in the back of your classroom, broadcast the lesson on Teams. You're processing the 25, 26 kids in front of you, but there might be another 4 who are at home for whatever reason, and straight away they have no reason to not engage in a lesson, even if they're ill at home, but were well enough to participate in the lesson. So I think there's an opportunity there to say, well, how do we deliver content in a slightly different way? And I think building content for the online classroom is something else, is an area that schools will have to sort of appreciate and take on board. Say, well, actually, how can we make a lesson still engaging for young people who are not physically in the classroom? How can we make that more interactive? How can we allow them a voice into that online platform? Because we're told we have to learn to live with COVID. So there might be different variants that are going to come along. That might mean actually we go back to a state of partial lockdown, and schools just need to be ready to be able to process that. I think well-being has been a real big issue now in terms of what's gone on and how do we look after vulnerable teachers as well. And I mean, we had lots of examples where kids were in school but the teachers weren't. So in this instance, it was teachers delivering the lessons from their front room and the kids in the classroom with a cover supervisor, sort of managing the behavior, but work itself being delivered by that trained qualified teacher. So I think that's another area that we are looking at in terms of how do we enrich the learning itself. And I also think the built environment has been a real topic across the country over this COVID period. Talking about ventilation, talking about the size of classrooms, have we got the buildings in 2021 that are fit for purpose, because it can be potluck depending on which part of the country you're in. What does your school look like? Is it one of the new build schools, or have you got a school that was built in 1930, still has the small corridors, small classrooms, and how do we actually meet that challenge effectively without bankrupting the government? Because essentially it's not we need more money, it's about maybe being smarter with the money that we do have. And the other big issue I think for us to consider in terms of COVID is the legacy education that the kids have missed. Because ultimately at the start of COVID, there was a lot of shutdown, and a lot of the online learning was given out but not necessarily measured in terms of how far have these young people traveled. So I know there's talk about how we reshape the curriculum, maybe actually condense the curriculum for the current year 10s and 11s so that they are able to access public exams next year. But are we then robbing those children of their right to a full and broad offer? Because if you condense your history curriculum, I'm a history teacher, you say, well, we're only going to teach these 5 topics, and essentially in 20 years' time, will that young person be able to have a conversation in a pub about an element of history that they never got a chance to be exposed to? So how do we wrap that around? How do we create more space within our school day to allow a fuller curriculum? Obviously, it might be Saturday intervention, it might be lunchtime, it might be after school, but we've got to think creatively. I think condensing the curriculum just to help young people pass exams takes us back to where we are now, where 54% of the young people do relatively well, and 46% don't.
Picking up on what so take the two questions I've just asked you. You've got the opportunities of blended learning, and are we just going to forget that and just say, well, okay, we'll come back to normal education, and we've got a problem because we've missed over the content, so let's condense it. Where we're missing a trick in the sense of the reason I asked the question is that one of the schools we work with started at COVID and said, actually, here's an opportunity. I'm going to use my surplus staff and I'm going to turn them into online tutors. Now that school is still, they've got 3 contracted members of staff who would have been full-time in the classroom and are now full-time online. Well, between them, they're covering a full timetable. Because they see the implications of exactly as you said, moving forward, an uncertain future, face-to-face not necessarily being permanent, some kind of blended experience being there. So they've taken the opportunity of the data that they know within the app and said, well, actually, here's a future for us. Let's do something that's online. Now, that has implications for excluded pupils, school refusers, the challenge when they come to get them in the classroom. And we know that some learners have really engaged with online learning where they didn't.
As a model.
As a model. So are we at a point, a kind of hiatus of change? Is that...
Yeah, I think we have to allow some natural osmosis here in terms of, I think this is an opportunity for lots of schools, lots of school leaders to try different things, because essentially we'll then be able to evaluate to see actually where the real success is and what's been the cost of that success. For instance, in terms of blended learning, I don't think we should ever go away from that now, because ultimately there is a huge opportunity. And if for instance, I was talking about history, talking about we're condensing the curriculum, yes, to allow the young people to have a fighting chance at doing well at a public exam, but it doesn't stop us from building those lessons and then shifting them to online, where actually this might not be in your covered exam content, but we think is a big part of the history curriculum that you should learn. And if we make that accessible, then you're now empowering families, family members, parents to work at home with those young people to say, look, it's not essential, but it's desirable that you learn about this, even though we know you won't be examined on it when you sit in the summer for your public exams. And I think the only way you can do that is by a way of creating some blended learning opportunities where, and those kids then have to have a right to come back. So how do you then build in a structure where every fortnight you might have a Q&A around, actually you've been looking at hyperinflation in Nazi Germany, which we know you might not need to cover, but now from that group of lessons, we're going to have an open forum, we're going to have a discussion, you can ask questions, a teacher is then able to interject and clarify misconceptions, where you're having those regular subject surgeries, maybe, to say, well, you've done this on your own, you might have had your parents helping you, you've had a support of a textbook and some websites and some video clips, but now you've got access to me, for this 1 hour seminar where we can just talk around the subjects. Because I think what's really important, the things we do best as classroom teachers is the bits of the curriculum or the hot bits in history that might not be written down in books, that help kids to make connections. And I think we should still be able to offer that opportunity. So I do think there's going to be change, and I think schools should naturally be allowed to see what that change looks like for them. And having a full understanding of your own capacity as a school, through the SMART app, for instance, would then ensure you actually know where your capacity is. And if you're going to be creative, you can be creative without breaking the bank. It's not, oh gosh, we're going to do this. Actually, it might be within your current capacity to say, let's find a creative way of doing it. I've seen some really creative things that's happened across the country during this period of COVID, and I think it'd be a shame if in September kids are back in school full time. We always know there's going to be kids who got reasons why they might not be in school, and I know some families are still unsure about the face masks and how their children will be, especially if they've got issues around their own personal health and they might actually their immune system might not be as strong as other young people, that we don't turn that off, and we keep working, on how we can make sure we're providing a good quality of education across the board.
That's the, it is about making that insightful judgment. I've got an opportunity here, and I've got some capacity. Therefore, I can invest in students. We've seen, we're often asked about, so what's the threshold of class size? So we'll stop doing things because we've got less than 10 children in the class. But we know some trusts, particularly, that are saying, we may have 4 secondary schools. Well, perhaps we haven't got enough music to deliver music lessons in each of the schools. But we could do a blended experience where 4 of them are offering some online provision and some peripatetic tutoring, so that they'll get to their GCSE and it will be by a blended experience. Others are doing it with computing, others are doing it with some of the smaller subjects that you wouldn't necessarily get a full class. Rather than saying to children now,
you can't do it.
Well, there's an opportunity here. Now, collaboration, we talk about sort of federated experiences, or a local group getting together, rather than the consortiums that we've had in the past. But some of that being delivered on an online provision is really powerful. It's a great opportunity.
And it allows kids to have choice as well, which is really important, because if they're committed to the subject, then they will make the sacrifice. If they realise that sacrifice means doing a bit more on your own or doing it in a slightly different way, but it still allows you the opportunity to complete that qualification. I remember a couple of years ago running an astronomy GCSE in a school I was in Lewisham, where I was a senior manager, and we found 12 young people who were committed to getting this additional GCSE, but they had to commit to their own Saturdays. It was with the observatory in Greenwich, but they were committed to going there on a Saturday and doing the work, because they wanted this additional GCSE. So I think young people have always shown resilience if they want something enough, and you sort of offer them a pathway to get it, even if there is a personal sacrifice. I think the end goal justifies the sacrifice. So I think finding a way of still offering a very diverse and broad curriculum, even if you offer the add-on subjects in a slightly different way, I think could have real benefits for young people.